The film begins showing a psychiatrist named Dr. Alan Fisher, moving nervously in his office. After writing his will, he commits suicide by jumping off the roof of the building. In a state prison, Fisher's protege, the psychiatrist Dr. James Martin, arrives to interview a notorious serial killer and death row inmate named Edward. Before meeting Edward, Martin meets Warden Moss and reveals that Fisher had been examining Edward shortly before his suicide. Edward is supposed to be electrocuted to die that same day. Moss says that Edward's fate depends on Martin's diagnosis. If Martin declares Edward sane, he will be executed, but if he is declared insane, as Fisher believed, Edward will be spared. Martin meets Edward, who is brimming with confidence and knows so much information about Martin that it leaves him in trouble. Edward claims that he is not a human, but a demon inside Eduardo's body called Nefarious, given to him by Satan, Nefarious for short. Martin does not believe Nefarious is who he claims to be. Instead, he thinks that what Edward is doing seems crazy, but he is surprised when Nefarious claims that he wants him executed, or rather that he wants Edward to be executed. Nefarious also announces that before the day is over, Martin will commit 3 murders. Martin, an atheist, opposes the idea, which angers Nefarious, who calls him a pompous sack of meat, thinking that he is only safe because he does not think there are such things as demons. Martin then asks Nefarious how he ended up with Edward. Nefarious explains that he began tempting Edward to commit petty crimes when he was young, then communicated with him through a Ouija board that Edward received for Christmas. Nefarious took possession of Edward's body only after Edward repeatedly agrees to be possessed. Martin brings in a priest to meet Edward's demon, which scares Nefarious until he realizes that the priest does not believe in demons and therefore does not affect him. Martin then asks to speak to Edward, which causes the evil to go away and produces a shy and childlike Edward, who is extremely dismayed and shaken by his possession. Edward claims to be possessed by a demon, and that demons have used his innocent body as a vessel to murder several people. As Martin investigates further, Nefarious takes the lead, claiming that Martin murdered his mother. Martin is shocked that Nefarious knows this and insists his mother died of a terminal illness and was killed after a difficult decision was made on his behalf. When Nefarious infers that Martin euthanize her in order to get her vast fortune, Martin gets angry and threatens to leave the meeting, but he changes his mind. Nefarious explains that he is mentally training Martin for a task to perform and that he mentally tortured Stuart and tricked him into taking his own life in order to select Martin for this job. As Martin continues to doubt Nefarious, the demon explains that he knows Martin's girlfriend is pregnant and that she is terminating her pregnancy because Martin threatened to break up with her to avoid fatherhood. Nefarious states that Martin can save his son with a simple phone call within the limited time, but Martin refuses, thinking Nefarious is bluffing while insisting that such a thing is his girlfriend's choice. But overcome with curiosity, Martin asks a friendly jailer for access to a phone, which he uses to call the women's health clinic. When he calls, he finds that his girlfriend has just finished having an abortion. Nefarious cackles with delight and tells Martin that all hell is rejoicing. Moments later, a prison guard asks Edward what he would like for one last meal before execution, after which Edward gives him specific instructions for a plain burger, fries, and a milkshake, only to get Nefarious to resume control and tell the guard to retract the order. Martin is now interested in what Nefarious has to say to him. Nefarious explains the war in heaven from his point of view, saying that the demons rebelled to escape eternal slavery and that they have been prospering in the world. He also explains that he chose the electric chair because it was the most agonizing and painful death there was and would be a parting gift before Edward's soul lands in hell for an eternity of more torment. Martin insists the world reclaim moral superiority by allowing all manner of rights and freedoms, which Nefarious laughs at before revealing to him the truth about such freedoms, including a decline in education and a resurgence in slavery and the sex trade, which the demons help the elite get by behind closed doors. Martin begins to feel sorry for Edward and almost writes him off as insane, which Nefarious tells him to edit. Martin is really confused about who Nefarious is until Edward breaks through and begs Martin to help him. But before he can tell Martin how to help him, Nefarious regains control and punishes Edward by breaking his finger before being able to reset it at Martin's urging. Nefarious then explains that the endeavor he wants Martin to do for him is to write a book called The Dark Gospel, which is his satanic equivalent of the Bible and will establish another world religion that will exist in the bondage of the demon's stands. Then Nefarious reveals a closely guarded secret that there are currently more people going to hell than heaven. Martin is called away by Warden Moss, who reveals that when they searched Edward's prison cell, they found documentation of Martin's life, as Nefarious had found all of his other victims, as well as the Dark Gospel that Edward had already written and which ascribes Martin's name. Moss encourages Martin to judge Edward, insisting that he will likely pursue Martin if he is spared. Martin, still believing Edward is faking, confronts Nefarious with the dossier on him in the manuscript. Breaking his hand to free himself from one of the handcuffs, Nefarious grabs Martin and threatens to snap his neck unless Martin pleads for his life. Terrified, Martin begs Nefarious to spare him, to which Nefarious agrees. He is beaten by the prison guards. In the heat of the moment, Martin declares that Edward is sane, but not before being warned by a triumphant Nefarious that he will sentence Edward to death. Edward's head is shaved and he is led to the electric chair. As Martin sits uncomfortably with the families of the Nefarious victims to witness the execution, he is complimented by the detective who stalked Edward for 6 years before capturing him. However, Martin is unsure if he made the right decision as he remembers the 3 murders Nefarious had told him, which he assumes were committed to his mother, his son and now Edward. Before the execution, Edward asks Martin to tell the truth about the demonic possession, but Martin isn't sure. Before the switch is flipped, Nefarious takes control of Edward's body one last time and asks Martin if he accepts his offer, but Martin tacitly declines. Disappointed, Nefarious quotes, "You were measured on the scales and found wanting," before leaving Edward's body, resulting in Edward suffering an extremely painful and horrible death in the chair. The demon then says to Martin, "You should have accepted my offer before possessing him." Martin, under Nefarious influence, grabs the detective's gun and holds the witnesses at gunpoint. Martin then realizes that the 3 murders he would commit that day were committed instead of his son, Edward, and now himself. Nefarious forces Martin to attempt suicide, but Martin spontaneously prays to God for help and the gun fails. Nefarious lets go of Martin as he falls unconscious into the guard's arms. The movie then jumps to a year later, where a visibly changed Martin is shown promoting the book Nefarious, not as a dark gospel, but as a cautionary tale rewritten so people can read and recognize the demonic influence in society. Although he insists he is still an atheist, he reveals that he has gone through many changes. On the way home, Martin sees a homeless woman rummaging through a dumpster. He hands her some money and she takes it, before saying, "Hi James," in Nefarious' voice, implying that she is the new host of Nefarious. The screen goes black while Nefarious' hideout laughter is heard. So, that's the end of our movie. If you've come this far, make sure to give a thumbs up and subscribe my channel. See you later.